Hi, Kristin. Welcome.
Hi, thank you.
We're so happy that you're here.
Thank you for having me, Kathy.
Will you tell us a little bit about your journey that has led you to become a mindfulness teacher?
Yes. So, for me, it started when my son Jack was in fourth grade. So that was let's see, he's the seventh now. So I don't know, 3.5 years or so ago. He was super struggling at school, kind of overwhelmed by everything, and I was with him at a uh, activity. He and I were walking down the hallway in his elementary school, and I could tell he was nervous, and he just all of a sudden just started panicking, um,
Mm,
hyperventilating, for
mm,
just having a real hard time. And we sat in the hallway. Um, and I just told him, like, you're safe, you're okay. I knew what was
mm,
happening, so I wasn't overly alarmed. I knew it would pass, but also it was super scary realizing how just how my sweet little boy was feeling. That was scary. Realizing, like, holy cow, he is taking in a lot.
mm,
He's super empathetic, and he just feels a ton. And I honestly think school was super overwhelming for him. He
mm,
was getting into trouble a bit at school because he would get distracted easily. So his teacher was always calling him back. And I think he didn't like
mm,
the attention of that, being called out. And she meant well, but for him,
mm,
it was just like a combination of things that were kind of hard. So so yeah, after that moment, I just started researching like anxiety in kids, and um just realized, like, it's a huge problem, and it's a huge
mm,
problem for adults, but especially it's alarming when, like, your sweet little kids who really don't have a ton of huge stressors in their lives,
mm.
compared to adults, are still like super struggling.
Yeah, yeah.
So I was talking to my neighbor a few months later, and she was like, Kristin, have you ever heard of transcendental meditation? And at that point, I had not heard of it. And she just told me that their oldest son, who really struggled with anxiety, had really benefited from doing it. So, and learning how to do it. So, as parents and their son, they went and learned. There's a really great teacher in Salt Lake. There's actually, I believe, only one teacher in Utah that
Mm,
teaches transcendental meditation. Um, anyway, so me and my husband decided I wanted to learn first before I brought Jack into it, because I needed to understand more what we were doing. So my husband and I went and learned. It's a super easy way to meditate, and uh, it's awesome. I strongly recommend it to anyone who's interested.
Will you share just a little bit more about what it is?
Yeah, so transcendental meditation has been around for, oh, I don't even know how long. There's a teacher named Maharishi that came from India that started it. My teacher, his name is Mark. He lives in Salt Lake. He trained with him, I think, in like the 60s. Like, they
Hmm.
lived, like they like lived. They had a bunch of teachers and people all living in a play, like an ashram type place. I believe. I could be wrong. If my memory is right, this is what happened. And then, yeah, there's teachers now, I think, all over the US, all over the world. And essentially, what you do is you're given a mantra that is, it's like a meaningless word. I mean, it has a meaning, but it's not relevant to, um, like, what you're doing. It's random. And that's a word that you will go back to in meditation and use for your
Hmm.
meditation. Um, yeah, and they teach you to meditate first thing in the morning, and then for 20 minutes, and then the second time, kind of as the beginning of the second half of your day.
Hmm.
So some people do that in the evening, some people do that in the late afternoons. just whatever works for you. So, okay, so Grant, my husband, and I went and we learned, and then we brought Jack in, and um, it was super great. It was Mark worked with him on over Zoom quite a bit, so it's a cool thing because the teacher will follow up with you after and make sure
Mm.
you're understanding how to do it and that it's actually working for you. So yeah, so my son Jack now he does it first thing in the morning and then after school typically. But for kids,
Really?
for kids it's usually you just do it for 10 minutes. 20 minutes is long for them to sit. Um, and I will often sit with Jack in the mornings. That's what we'll
Hmm.
do. Once he's ready, dressed for school, I'll be like, meet in my room and we'll sit for 10 minutes. We lock the door and just meditate together.
Oh,
It's
how
super
neat
fun.
that you have that time to connect with each other. I also kind of love this way of doing it, like when they get home, to kind of transition from
Mm-hmm.
school back to home. And with our youngest, Ollie, I think that could be a really helpful tool for him to have too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's super great. And I think they need a minute after
Mm,
school. There's usually stress and, you know, whatever happened during that day. It's just kind of like a letting go and then a ritual to move into the next part of the day.
I love that.
um, and what I've noticed with Jack since he's been practicing it is uh, less stress, less anxiety,
Hmm.
and it's like he can roll a lot easier with
Hmm.
life instead of going into panic.
And how long
So,
has he been doing that now?
um, so Jack has been doing it. So I have been meditating with Jack for several years, but for transcendental meditation,
Hmm.
they want you to be about 10 when you go in. Um, and then the pandemic happened. And so, anyways, he's only been doing it, I want to say 9 months with NTM. So it's
And it sounds
yeah.
like in that 9 months you have seen a shift.
Oh yes, for sure. It's super fun when you see stuff that normally would freak your kids out and where you just can kind of shrug and let it be. It's actually astounding. It's pretty cool.
Well, and it's I mean it seems like a seemingly simple thing, right? That can have such an impact.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting for me. I notice like I mean, I've been a meditator for years, but I went about 5 days without meditating on a trip over the summer. And I noticed on like day 5, I was the grumpiest person and for no reason. And I had like a super, big moment of like, oh, you have not been meditating. That clears out so much.
Yeah.
And then it was just like a call to like get back to it. And it was
Hmm.
fascinating to see how my body had responded for not like it's not immediate. It took a few
Mm.
days and then it was a grumposaurus. So it was it was fun. It's fascinating to see how it accumulates and you do really well and then like breaks in it can notice that as well too. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah.
And then tell me kind of it seems like that experience with Jack has kind of opened up this path to exploring more around the breath and around mindfulness. Is that right?
Yes, yes. So um that experience with Jack and then my husband and I run a company where we do um management around housing and I ended up teaching our women's group a few like over I want to say a year and a half ago just about completing the stress cycle and what that looks like and how we can let our bodies know we're safe and it was it was a great lesson and what was so fascinating to me was the amount of people afterwards that came up to me saying how much they needed it how much they
Mm.
needed help dealing with stress that their bodies are just literally stuck in fight flight or freeze and it's wreaking havoc on our on our health and our happiness So that was a huge kick as well to like, I, there's just a huge need. So I went and found there's a group in Salt Lake called In Body Academy, and they teach mindfulness teaching. And it's a 200-hour training. I've probably spent 400 or 500 hours just as stuff branches out and you want to learn more about something. So many hours just studying mindfulness and meditation.
Well, and my guess is in those hours, you're also practicing.
Oh,
You're
yes.
working with people. People are working with you. Tell me a little bit
Yeah.
more about what that looks like.
Sure. So like the coursework
Yeah, the
or
coursework.
how
Yeah.
that's okay. Yeah, so we've just studied all sorts of things. Mindfulness for chronic pain, for
Hmm.
anxiety, for just relaxing. Um, it's funny, I remember I had a big spinal surgery when I was a teenager, and this nurse in the hospital at Primary Children's started teaching me how to body scan in a hospital bed. And at
Hmm.
the time, I didn't understand what was happening, but it was super useful. So, anyways, that's an area I spent a lot of time in studying just to help work with people with chronic pain because I also experience chronic pain. And there's something about not resisting the pain when it's in your body and
Hmm.
um, just, acknowledging it and kind of letting it be in you that it lessens pain in a way. It can help you be with it in a different way. It's really beautiful.
So, can you give an example of what a body scan is and what that would look like if you were feeling pain somewhere? And then how
Sure.
do you like move through that?
Yeah. So you could typically, like when I do it, I love to lay down, just get kind of cozy, and you might put on some relaxing music or no music, but music is an awesome tool with all of this if you have space for that. But you might just start from your toes and move through each part of your body and just feel into it, see what's
Hmm.
there. Oftentimes, with chronic pain, there's anger and
Hmm.
fear. Um, so you might, and for me, that's usually located in my chest. So when I get through my body right there, and it's an acknowledgement that it's there. It's not acceptance that it's there. It's just like, oh, that's there. That's with me.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, start from your toes and just move up and feel into every part of your body all the way to your head. Um, and yeah, with some good music, it can be very relaxing and often help decrease the resistance that you have to
So,
it.
so then when you're laying there and you feel it in your
Mm-hmm.
chest and you
Mm-hmm.
just are acknowledging it,
Mm-hmm.
and then what do you?
Acknowledging it. And I often will breathe into it. So if you bring
Hmm.
awareness to that, so it's just like in your mind's eye, you go to your chest and you might just take, 3 big breaths into it. Yeah, it's
And then I want to go
awesome.
back, if you don't mind,
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like it's kind of similar to what you were just sharing. When you were speaking to the women's group
Oh, yeah.
about completing the stress cycle, do you mind? This was really profound for me when you shared it with me, because so often we go to fight, flight, or freeze,
Mm-hmm.
but then what do? Right? Like we get
Right.
out of that, and then we're usually exhausted. But how do we complete energetically that cycle so that can move through us?
Okay. So first, a couple things. Know that the average emotion lasts 90 seconds.
Hmm.
If we don't go to our minds to explain it. And that's the tricky part, right? Because most of us, all of us, I would say, I'm not perfect at this, but you'll have a hard emotion show up and then your brain wants to explain why that's there. And you are deepening your neural pathways to explain this thing. And
And
just think
creating more
them,
story around it, right? Like then you're
yeah,
creating more story and you're creating, maybe not more trauma, but it gets sticky. Like it
yes,
adds to that instead of what I'm hearing you say is that if for 90 seconds I can just be in that emotion.
It will pass.
Mm.
So having, I would say, have awareness when that shows up. You know, I had a really hard thing happen in my family about 2 weeks ago, and I probably spent 5 days doing this. It was a big emotion. And each day it was just a surrender to the emotion, knowing it was there. When I would catch myself fighting with someone in my head, that for me, that's a huge indicator too that I am not being present and that is not real. And to go back to it. So each day it lessened. And I would say by day 5, it was like almost back to normal. And I didn't cause extra trauma on anyone else while I was hurting. It was
Mm.
just a really beautiful way to deal with something. And honestly, that's probably the first time in my life I've been able to do that and see it happening. Um, so, but it's taking a lot of work to get there. I know that that is not normal for everyone, but
Yeah, and I think so often, at least in my own practice, like I try to work through it. Like I'm very aware when things are happening and work through
mm-hmm.
it and try to not add more to it so it doesn't, you don't start that cycle of spinning. But then I think one of the expectations that I had is that you just do it once and it's over, right? So what I'm hearing you say that it's normal to have
Oh
these
yeah.
emotions over multiple days, and that working through them throughout that time, you're not doing anything wrong. You're actually doing it right. And you're now at this place where you've been practicing this for what, 500 hours at least, if not more, that now you're in a place, those hard things aren't going to stop happening, right? Like
Right.
we're still going to have those hard things happen, but it's having that awareness. And then as those thoughts are coming up, working through them.
Yes, exactly. And I think, for me, it was 5 days. I think if I had suppressed and just pushed it
Mm.
away like my old habits would be, that could have turned into months of suffering. So I don't know. There's this like, there's a payoff to it as well with just as far as time goes. Although stuff it does, even a week later, I woke up sad yesterday and I knew where it was from and letting it be, and it did pass. So to go back to how do we deal with ending our stress cycles,
Mm.
sadness, all these big emotions, know that there is an end. I
Mm.
mean, there are big things that may take a long time. I don't mean to say that for everything, but for a lot of things, especially if there's not another person involved or next to you, you know, you can run through that emotion. And the main thing to know is your body needs to know it's safe. So
Mm.
that's how we complete the cycle. So let the emotion go through, and sometimes we can't let ourselves cry, or we're not in a setting where that is safe to do. So maybe you need to save it till you're home from work or whatever the case is. A release of emotion, crying is a huge helper in that. Um, but whatever it is, let the emotion go through and then let your body know it's safe. There are things like exercise is a huge one, meditation, and then breathing is a really interesting one because most of the world breathes in their chest, right? So, like, pay attention to where you're breathing. And if you're breathing in your chest, that is where you breathe when you're panicked. Like, that's what
Mm.
your breath moves to your chest, and that's where you're breathing. Okay. So, to let your body know you're safe and not to enhance the panic, so get out of your chest, is to move into your belly. So,
Mm.
belly breathing is super calming, super awesome. And it's actually something I do regularly for myself and something I'll do with my children when they're struggling. So, for example, like when anxiety is showing up, one of my favorite things to do is turn on one of my favorite songs. And I know it's about 3 minutes long.
Mm.
And I'll put on headphones and just lay down. And my focus is to breath to my belly, and do it through your nose too. It's super awesome. Um, you'll breathe through your nose into your belly, as big as you can, and then out. And yeah, do that for a song for 2 to 3 minutes, and it'll seriously change how your body feels in the best way.
And was there a book that you shared around Christmas time? Was that you?
Yes. So there's a book called Breath.
It is called
And
Breath.
when you interview Audrey, I'm sure she'll talk about it. She's the one
Okay.
who introduced that book to me. Um, Breath is awesome, a great book to read. But it focuses on all kinds of things with health as well as breathing. Um,
And was there like a tool to help?
oh yes, there's a cool tool I found. I think it's called a kumosu. Ooh. It's basically a straw. I believe it was developed by it's just someone made a necklace version of this tool that like Japanese monks would use.
Oh,
And
that's what it is.
mm-hmm, and I got one for Christmas, and it's a necklace I wear, and all it does is it shortens your out breath. So when you breathe in through your mouth, maybe 4 seconds, and then breathe out of this tool, it's 8 seconds. So it's almost double. And
Mm.
it's like breathing out a straw. And the point is to, as you slow your out breath, your body will calm naturally.
Mm.
So that's another thing I will use in moments of high stress. Or just if set a reminder on your phone, whatever through the day, and stopping and doing that type of breathing is great. You don't have to have a fancy necklace that does it, but it is a super fun, pretty tool that I love to use. I think I'm gonna get one for my son for his birthday actually.
Well, I think
So
at least myself, like when I think of breathing, it's always the in breath. I don't know that I focus a whole lot on the exhale and
oh yeah.
lengthening that. So
Yes.
I like doing that. I also like what you said a little bit about this difference between saving the emotion and suppressing the emotion, because that was my program probably for 40 years of just
Mm-hmm.
stuffing, right? Like I just would stuff it, wouldn't look at it, wouldn't want to talk about it. But I like this idea that sometimes we aren't in a place where we
Mm-hmm.
can really take that out and unpack it and be with it. Um, do you have any examples or any kind of tips for what that can look like? I'm guessing something like having just I like this idea of laying down, going back to what that experience was, but kind of giving it this I don't know if respect is the right word, but kind of providing it this place that it can now come out and be seen.
Oh, I love that. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, I don't know, finding people that you are safe to let
Mm.
stuff out with that maybe won't necessarily feed the negativity. So if you had a hard time with a person, people that are that can be neutral, that love you, but won't, feed energy into the negativity either. And that they can be a safe place for you. It's That's a really awesome and beautiful thing when you have that with someone, you know.
And I think especially as women, because that's the way I frame my world, it's typical to get together and just complain, right? And it's just
Mm-hmm.
this negative um, energy, but that there's not a whole lot of active listening going on or creating space for the person that's sharing to be heard.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I like this idea of when we are with someone that's sharing something hard that they're going through, that we can just be neutral, that we don't have to add to that experience, but that we can be just a place where someone can be heard.
Yes, being a safe space for them to let them be, and also know they're supported and loved, you
Mm,
know.
yeah.
Um, Another really awesome thing you can do for ending the stress cycle is to, with someone you're safe with, um, like a 10-second hug, like a long hug. Like a
Hmm.
hug long enough that you know when your body relaxes into it, like you have to hit that point.
Hmm.
It can't be too fast. It has to be that length. And you'll feel it, you'll know when it happens. That is your body will know you're safe because your body cannot do that unless it's safe.
So
That's my
having
favorite.
longer hugs. I
Yes.
like that because sometimes like John will like trap me in the hug and like won't let me go at all. And it's like this surrender, right? Like
Yes.
this, I feel like that it's just kind of like the weight just kind of comes off.
Yes. But yeah, your body is safe, right? So like
Mm.
when my kids hug me, I have this rule. When they hug me, I don't let go until they do
Oh, I love that.
because they'll know what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I wait till they loosen usually because I am a good source of that for them, right? As a mom, we get
Mm.
to be that, which
I
is
love
fun.
that. And I love that by doing so, you let them learn to listen to what they need to.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a
Yeah.
lot.
I don't want them to ever feel rushed or that I don't have time for that. And, sometimes we don't have time or we have to hurry or there's something going on. But when I can make it happen that way, I let it be.
Oh, I love
It's,
that.
yeah. Yeah. I forgot. There's one thing I wanted to mention about in those stressful moments, things that we can do.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So we've talked about letting our bodies know we're safe, but what about like in the moment when our anxiety's high? Okay, so there's a great acronym called STOP. And here's what it stands for. S is for stop, like literally pause. T, take a breath. And I would say take this breath into your belly. Okay, this is to let you know you're safe, to be in your body. It's a way for, oftentimes our mind is literally a mile away and we are not present and we're pissed and we're whatever we are, comes back to our body. Take a breath into your belly. Observe what's going on in your body and then proceed.
Mm. I like I like the stop, but I also like adding because we always tell our kids to take a breath and then they get even more mad. But to do the belly breath, to really
Yes.
take the deep breath because what happens is right like we go offline like our brain
Uh-huh.
that's used to firing and using all of the brain, it goes offline and we're in that prefrontal cortex where it's
Mm-hmm.
fight, flight, or freeze. And there is no reasoning with any of
Nope.
us when we're in
Mm-hmm.
that. And like Ollie will often like will be like, "Are you okay?" He's like, "No, I am not okay." And it's like, well, of
Mm-hmm.
course he's not okay. I think you were with us when we were sledding and he got knocked over by the old dude and he was just like raging on the hill. And I'm like, that's not helpful. Like me saying that does not help him at all. If anything, it probably is making it worse. But to take the moment, kind of stop, squeeze their hands, look them in the eye, remind them to take that breath into the belly. And then I can kind of hear like asking the question of like, well, what are you feeling in your body right now? And I think
Mm-hmm.
also as parents, when or partners or coworkers, when we're with somebody that is really offline, um, to create that space and that calm, and to not show up in that place of rage and chaos, because that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
help those stressful moments at all. So
Oh, yeah.
say that again. So
That's awesome.
stop.
Yes. So stop, pause, right? Stop,
Mm-hmm.
take a breath, take a belly breath, take several, this is not just one. It might be 10. I don't know. You decide, you'll know what's right for you as you feel your body calm, what you need. Observe. So observe what's happening in your body and perhaps the situation, right? But just actually be present there and then proceed.
That's
Yeah.
so great. I'm gonna work on that. starting today.
Yeah, I mean, and so like our thoughts tend to fuel our emotions and sensations, right? So if we're panicked and then we're feeding the panic, or we keep going in that way, it tends to just fuel it, which
Mm-hmm.
isn't helpful, as we just talked about, right? So yeah, the stopping is a really important part to break that up. Yeah. I can share a couple of things I do with my
Yeah,
kids if
I'd
you
love
want.
to hear
Okay.
that. Please.
Okay.
Yes. I was just going to
So
ask.
I have a fiery little 7-year-old Deacon, and one of
That's
his,
good.
his emotions are big, always big. So the things I've learned to do with him are, one, I hold him all the time. And eventually I know he's gonna get too big, but he isn't yet. But part of it is calming, just so he's in a
Mm,
safe arms that aren't judging, telling him to be anything different, but just let him be.
mm,
And like when your kids are fighting and you're like, work it out or whatever it is, like oftentimes they can't because they are offline, or
yeah.
they can't make those great, they don't make you don't make great choices when you're like that, right? Or you
Mm-hmm.
literally can't think of a logical way to figure out a problem.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a huge one for me, is just holding him. But also I like what you talked about, like what are you feeling, what's going on. So you might just be like, what's in you right now? If you had to pick a rock, which color would it be right now? Oh, you'd grab the red rock. Why is that? Oh, because you're angry, and anger is red and lava and fire. Okay, tell me more about that. you know and let him, that's a great way to work through those emotions. Let them out. And often you will see the emotion gets smaller and smaller as you go through that process. Another thing you might do is we'll take like a balloon, and I'll be like, okay, I want you to blow in all of that anger, all of that into the balloon. Blow it up as big as you need. Keep going, let it through. And there's like something about that physical act of putting it out. And then ask them, do you want to let it go? Do you want to see what happens with the balloon? Or do you want to tie it up and save it? And they can choose either one. It doesn't matter. Typically, kids let it go though, because that's fun. But there's something about that I want to say, I don't know, just doing that with them is super. They have attention from you. They get to work through some pain, and there's like a physical letting go
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah. And yeah, like a physical place to put it. I like that idea
Mm-hmm.
with the balloon.
Mm-hmm. And the other things I will do when I can tell he's struggling, I'll make a game of like, hey, can you balance this beanbag on your head? And it sounds so silly and simple, but just that physical act of putting something on your head and trying to keep it there, guess what? You're so present when you do that. So that's a
I can
fun one.
totally, yeah, see us doing something similar. But I can also see how some of the things that I have tried in the past haven't worked because they weren't really addressing what he needed in that moment. A lot of the way that I've parented has been through distraction, and that isn't addressing anything, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
talking about the emotions, feeling the emotions, working through them, and then at a later time kind of going back to them and talking through it and normalizing big emotions and helping to find tools and ways to do things in a different way than they've been programmed to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I
super
love
fun.
that. Oh, thank you, Kristin. That's so great.
You're welcome.
Is there anything
You're
else you'd
welcome.
like our listeners to know?
Oh, I would just say have fun with mindfulness. And I know that's it's like a word everyone uses, but for me, it's, being aware of our emotions, um, paying attention to our body. Like those are all like the really, big things that have big
Mm-hmm.
implications um, with how we live in our world. But one of my favorite things to do with like kids and well, anyone really, is like with food or with nature. Like going for nature walks. What does that look like? That's like, oh my gosh, what do you see on the ground right now? Like, do you see all those ants? What are they doing? Where are they going? And even as an adult, it's fun to have a beginner's mind as if you have no
Mm,
idea and just like you're experiencing things for the first time. It's one of my favorite attitudes to take into things, even things I've done 100 times, because you are like, if this was my first time doing this, what would I notice? What would I
mm.
feel? What would I see? What would I taste or smell? So one of my favorite things I've done with my kids is like giving them a chocolate chip and be like, okay, pretend you're an alien. This is your first time on planet Earth. And they're like, guys, you need to try this chocolate chip. Okay. You know, do you notice that your mouth waters as you bring it up to your mouth? Like, what is happening in your face right now in response to this chocolate chip? Okay, then what is it like when it's in your mouth? Does it melt? What does it taste like? What does it feel like? Anyways, all of a sudden you're having like this incredible experience with a piece of chocolate. It's really fun. So I don't know. There's so much joy to be had.
And it's free, right? Like
It's
the
super
ability
easy.
to use all of our senses is something that we have available to us at no cost.
No
And they're
cost.
always there. So often just, running in the background, but providing it just that time to be present with it, to experience it. And I love this concept of shared mindfulness, especially together as a family, because then what are you doing? You're fostering and nurturing those relationships, but you're also creating memories together. And um, just how neat to have our children have those experiences that we didn't have, and to be,
Yeah,
7 years old and have these tools that here we are learning a lot later in life.
right.
I think it's
Right.
so neat. Well, thank you for all of
Super
your
fun.
tips and for
Oh,
everything that you've
you're
shared.
welcome. You're welcome, Kathy. It was super fun.